now being recorded.
In the legal space in our environment and has been a wonderful supporter of the Goering Center for quite a long time. Cassidy Schiller, CPA and Advisors, and PNC Bank, all wonderful partners and who help bring the Goering Center not only to these wonderful presentations, but now into your very own home. So we're delighted to have them on board. As Travis mentioned today, he's going to be our moderator, and he's the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Leadership Acceleration. And our key presenter today is Diane Egbers, who is the President and CEO. And as you can see, you got to love a subject matter expert title. We're not surprised by that, but we're delighted to have her on board. Let me do a little housekeeping before we jump into the material. The webcast, as you just heard, is being recorded and will be distributed and be available on our Goering Center resource page after this session. So if there's some things you want to go back to and revisit, or you want to share with others in your organization, please feel free to go back and do that. All lines have been muted so we can keep the focus on our speakers here today and to eliminate the background noise. To ask a question, there's a chat box. Most of us can see it in our bottom left-hand corner. And if you'll put your questions there, we will collect them through the morning and we'll be able to re-engage. It's a public chat, so everybody can see what you write down. So always think about, if you don't want it to be a headline in the newspaper, then don't put it in the chat box. But also, if you'd stay focused on the presentation and not chat back and forth, that'd be great. And we'll be working at answering your questions as we go through the session. So with that, I have the great honor and distinction of turning this presentation over to Diane now, who is going to take us through the objectives and bring us to some really great knowledge and great experience today through these rapidly changing and challenging times. Diane?
Thanks so much, Carol and Travis. Probably the best place to start is, I don't know about you, but I woke up this morning, flipped on the news, and I said, surely somebody is going to say April Fools to me here in a minute, right? That's the experience we have right now on a daily basis. You know, the estimate in New York City is that we're losing a person every 10 minutes. And so one of the things that we want to talk about is what that fear, you know, does to us as individuals and how to manage that as leaders. So that's part of what we'll get to today, as well as some very proactive things to help you and help your business. A little bit of context about me. We started Leadership Acceleration about 23 years ago. And in the 2008 and 2009 recession time, I spent about 6 months really turned around as a business until I recognized that my clients were expecting me to help them lead. And so developed a lot of what we're going to talk about today in really supporting the work of the businesses at that time. And you know, and that's the great thing about, you know, having the wealth of time and experience that many of you in your businesses have and we have, is that sometimes it's not your first rodeo and you're really able to share the things that you've learned, because these are only things that we learn as we go through crisis. And so if this is the first opportunity for you, I hope some of the strategies and tools we're going to share today are really helpful to you and your business, and we do it with loving concern. You know, our desire is to see every business come out of this situation stronger than ever. And so that's, you know, our intent as we work with you today. So we're going to begin with kind of the 4 A's of approaching kind of leading rapid change. Understand the importance specifically the first 2, acknowledging reality and assessing that change is needed. And we'll apply those tools here in webinar 1 and then have you do a bit of homework before we come back to our second session, which will be on April 22nd. So as we get into it, we know leaders who utilize the strategies that we're going to talk about are in the top 20% to effectively lead and succeed with clarity in crisis. And the reason we know that is that it requires a different, unique set of leading change skills. And so we know today that all of us have the need to work on leading change skills, because in general, the world is changing at a rapid pace. But very specifically, when you go through crisis, there's a difference. And the difference is that in crisis, we experience fear. We experience fear first and foremost about our family and loved ones, about the future and uncertainty in our businesses, about the things that can, if left unchecked, really immobilize us in our businesses. And I don't know about you, but I have some days that are better than other days. You know, some days much easier for me to work on the proactive strategies we've established as a business. And other days it takes a lot of emotional energy to work past the fear. So one of the strategies we want to give to you, even just in starting out as it relates to this, is really thinking about limiting the amount of news you're taking in on a daily basis. If you start to feel anxious and worried, likely the need is to dial back a bit on how much information you're taking in and really refocus yourself on, you know, the things that you can be doing now today to take your business forward. Okay, and so those 4 things are to acknowledge the current reality you're in your business, and we'll give you a tool to assess and do that. Assess the changes that are needed. We'll also get into the details of that here in a few moments. To act decisively then, and then align your team to the new vision that will carry you forward. And so I'm going to use the example of a company as we go through this to talk to you about it, but I wanted to give you the context of a little bit of data. We are members of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business, that network. We went through that training as a business. And one of the things that's of value to us is now, as one of those 10,000 businesses nationwide that's in that network, we participated in a survey and got the results of this survey last week. And so interestingly, in the past 30 days, this is a nationwide survey we thought that would be of interest to you. 51% say the business will only be able to continue to operate for 0 to 3 months. That's the nature of the environment that we're in as small to privately held businesses. 96% say they've already been impacted by the outbreak. 75% say their business has been impacted by fewer sales, less productivity around those things. 53% say their employees don't have the ability to telecommute, so that has been a significant challenge, just the fundamentals in communicating with each other and staying connected. And then 87% are not confident with their contingency plans. Now, that contingency plan comment can really cover a broad number of things. So the first and foremost 2 we want you to focus on are your cash flow and your credit availability. We know that that contributes more to the demise of business than any other factors. And so today, I want you to listen through the entire lens of, have we adequately addressed between now and August or September our cash flow and credit needs? And if that's the fundamental for you, then I first and foremost want you to focus on that first. If you feel like you're in a good position with that, you've mastered as much as you can. I know in our case as a business, we're waiting on the Small Business Administration and Fifth Third to get back to us. And we've done as much as we can do right now as a business. Some of you may say, yeah, I'm in a kind of wait and hold position like we are. That would be the first thing as we think about contingency plans. Secondarily then is around lost revenue, lost sales, unique client relationships, how you're going to recover and change behavior when things do come back online. And so we'll talk more about that as we get into it. But first, we wanted to just really ask, and I'm going to have Carol ask some questions for you to think about in your business.
Okay, great. Thanks, Diane. The first question is about, how can you acknowledge the new reality in your business? And I had the opportunity to tap into some of the John Maxwell Leadership in Crisis, which covers some of the things we're going to highlight as well today, especially about the emotion. One of the things that he really featured was about making sure that people are really at the top of mind. And we're going to talk about the communication aspect and just recognizing what people are going through from an emotional point of view. So that ties quickly into, so what's your new reality in the business? And then what emotions are you experiencing? And be thinking about what emotions are others experiencing. And if you would, go ahead and put your responses to these questions in the chat box, and we're going to be able to bring those back into our presentation here today. So when I think about, as leaders, we tend to be communicating a great deal. Diane's already pointed out, how does that play into what is it that people really need to hear? And so I think that the emotional side, thinking about empathy and thinking about compassion. Also, then think about, how are you assessing the impact if you don't change rapidly? We've certainly seen it with restaurants, for example, when they can't have diners in the restaurant, but rapidly they have curbside service. I've had the experience of trying to go to a downtown restaurant for carryout, and they were so booked up they couldn't even take an order for that evening. So we're seeing some really nimble behavior, recognizing that they can lower their staff, but they can keep some business up, but trying to put some numbers to the bottom line. I thought the study and the data that Diane just shared is very telling, kind of where are you on that scale? And so if you share your experiences, I see some responses coming in the chat box about that. So let me just stop for a moment and let's begin to take a look at what's there.
Okay. So Travis,
sure, Carol, Diane, sorry to jump in early on you there, but I did want to let others know that the chat box is typically in the lower left-hand corner. If you're having trouble finding that, you might need to maximize your screen. Lisa, if you have other direction on that, you can also chime in if it's not showing up for some. But the theme, we have lots of comments that are coming through, Diane and Carol, and anxiety, stress, the unknown, concern, and the common theme through that is, as you alluded to, Diane, is fear. And I'll admit that I'm fearful right now as well. I was just wondering, is there a way that we can harness fear for good?
Absolutely, Travis. And one of the things that, we want to think about is, fear is an immobilizing emotion. So when we're fearful and we feel anxious, it takes up so much of our emotional capability that we're really in that flight or fight kind of area of our brain. So, we talk about kind of the reptilian brain is where the emotion lies. And, what compels us to action is really being able to apply our rational brain to that. And so one of the strategies that we talk about is, when I feel really anxious or fearful, am I asking myself questions that engage my rational brain? And so questions like, will I remember exactly what's happening on this day a year from now? If my best friend were sitting here with me, what advice, would that person give me? So when we think about, gaining perspective, we have to recognize that we've got to get out of that part of our brain, which, can be a vicious cycle of one emotion after the other, and compel our brain to apply the rational side, the side that really helps us to gain perspective first and then to take action. And so, just want to encourage that. Any other comments there, Travis, that you see?
Yes, I do. Actually, this was more of a comment that I think adds some positivity to the conversation here. Tara, who we know well, she's just feeling blessed that we can still operate. She's thankful for her team, that they can be energized, to be working and staying close, staying as mentally and physically healthy as possible. So thank you, Tara, for sharing that. And I did have one other quick question, Diane, if you wanted to take one of those right now, or we can move on. It's up to you.
Okay, we can take it.
Yeah, I had one question user who messaged me privately, and I know we talked about this on our podcast that was released yesterday. They were sharing that they're having trouble with some steps on gaining clarity. Would you be able to offer something on that right now?
Sure. So as we think about the steps to gain clarity, we're going to get into kind of assessing the new and acknowledging the new reality and assessing impact. And so the methodology we're going to give you is to do an external analysis and an internal analysis of your company to gain clarity. So what we're going to offer up today is really a good process for some of you who are leading your company to do individually first, and then to engage your team in it. So many of you are working remotely. Really good to just send them these documents and walk through some of this process together. So the outcome from today's session is I want you to come up with at least 3 new ideas, alternatives, or new vision for some problem that's presenting itself in your business that you need multiple alternatives to solve. And so on the 22nd, when we pick back up, we will spend time talking about, so of those alternatives, then how do you assess what is the best alternative for your business? And so we will jump right into that. We'd like to say that also we really need to understand the individual's reaction to change, and knowing that that's essential in leading rapid change. And this goes back to the conversation we were having just a few minutes ago for us as leaders, is not only do we have to understand, what specifically needs to change in the business, which is the core takeaway from the webinar today, but we also have to understand the psychology of what people are really going through. And so, one of the leading professors at Harvard Business this week has come out and said this is really akin to grieving a lost one at this point, because people are affected on such an elemental level. When we hear we lost 800 people in the United States yesterday, I mean, it is such tremendous loss, and it creates fear. And so we know the paradox for us is we as organizations need to focus on the optimism. We need to figure out, what we're going to gain collectively out of this experience, but we can't lose that dynamic in the middle, which is what our followers need. And so right now, our followers need trust, compassion, and stability, and hope more than ever. They need for us to show up as leaders who are hopeful and optimistic, but are very willing to be real with them about the experience they're having, so we can bring them along with us and not leave them behind. Because leaders, by virtue of our role, have to be 3 to 6 months ahead. Right now, I'm thinking about how we focus and succeed in the August, September, and October timeframe. In our business, because it takes 3 to 6 months to cultivate new clients, we always need to be out ahead. And so our risk as leaders is we're so caught up in solving problems and getting out ahead that we can really leave the team behind. So especially to notice the ones that seem to be more immobilized by fear, and to really offer trust, compassion, stability, and hope as a way to get them to start processing this in their rational brain, to really step out of the immobilizing kind of fear emotions. Okay, and so on the change curve, where we are right now is we're at the bottom of that change curve. President Trump said yesterday the next 2 weeks are going to be really tough for us as a nation. And then we're really going to get to experimenting what it's like to go back to work, hopefully, to really create a new future. And so just recognizing that when we're at the bottom of that individual change curve, people really need from us as leaders some compelling reasons to get to the other end of that and to start to explore. And that's really the focus of our remaining time together is, how do we get there, okay? So in general, the 4 phases of change are here. What we're going to focus in on between today and the 22nd is just that very first phase. What we do in that first phase is most important. And that's, in a rapid sense, how are we setting the stage to increase urgency, build a guiding team, and have a vision for what needs to change, okay? And so when we think about your change opportunity, I want you to have something in mind. And as I said, for you, if you're still focused on your cash flow and your credit capabilities, that's what I would want you to start with. If you have worked past that fundamentally for your business and you're focused on other issues and problems that are arising, then we'll ask you to focus on that. And so as we get into it, I'm going to take you now to the first of the 4 E's, the document to analyze the changes needed. I'm trusting that you've been able to pull that down and have that in front of you. But if you don't, I think we've got a visual of that. Yeah, so hopefully you can see. Let's see, I think these might be a little out of order. So I'm going to jump to the 4 E's first. So the first thing I want you to do as a leader is to say, oh, sorry about that. I did have my apologies. The 4 S's were first. So the 4 S's, as we think about that, are the external environment, the external analysis. So as we think about those are stakeholders, share of mindset, supports, and systems impact. So let me just give you, one of our clients is a distributor. They distribute drinks into supermarkets and convenience stores. Okay, so immediately, as you can imagine, about 70% of their business is convenience stores. When people, got nervous going to gas stations and stopped going into convenience stores, that was a significant immediate change in their business. Good news for them is their business is up 150% with the things that they're supplying to grocery stores. And so, for them as a business, they had to look at, okay, who are our current stakeholders and where do we stand with them? So in their case, it was distributors, it was grocery stores, convenience stores, and especially the logistics and trucking industry, because they were having a lot of problems initially getting their product delivered to grocery stores because there was so much demand and so few carriers available. And so as we think about then looking at the short-term and long-term impact of that in order to get to what the implications are for your business, we want you to think about, okay, so one of your key stakeholders obviously is your end customer as well. And so what impacts are happening externally in the marketplace that are affecting who we serve? And so that's one of the first things to assess. Second, what is our current share of market? What are the percent changes in our overall profitability, our percent of sales, all of the things that we're seeing an immediate impact on? How can we assess that short-term impact? Because it's usually right in front of us that data is coming in. And then as things start to turn around and pick up, what is that long-term impact for us? So, as we think about share of market, we're really thinking right now, and are there new competitors? Are there changes in the marketplace that are happening because of the current environment? And do we need to be cognizant of those as we progress from here? So what are those differences? And then as we get to supports, it's really our dedicated suppliers, vendors, key strategic relationships. Are those intact? How is this impacting them? And on the value chain for our customers, are there people that we could reach out to and support? Are there opportunities to do things differently? So let me give you an example of that. One of our current clients is in a non-essential surgery business. And so they're offering to contract their entire clinical group to the local hospitals if the local hospitals need additional staff. You know, that came as a result of walking them through this process. They looked at, wow, you know, hospitals are going to have tremendous needs for staff. We have staff that aren't working. Can we be a part of this value chain now? And what they're going to be able to do is offer 30% hazard pay. Instead of paying their staff 100%, they're going to be paying an additional 30%, and then the hospitals are going to pick up 100% of the clinical staff and some of the support staff salaries. So when you think about all the things that are possible to make lemonade right now, you know, are you considering everybody in your value chain, how you might help them, and then how it may help you as a business? Then your systems impact, you know, what of our current systems and supports are helping us? So operational, human, technology, core capabilities, you know, what is impacted right now? And what of that is going to be, you know, the short-term objectives to overcome, and are there things in the longer term that are going to be challenges, barriers, obstacles to getting back to business? Okay. And so as you look at this format, one of the things we want you to think about is really good at the top to do an overall what's helping us now externally in the marketplace and what's hindering us, and to do that with your team, and then to walk through each of these very pragmatically. And you may want to, as a leader, go through it yourself first and then lead your team through it, so that you're really taking and acknowledging the current reality of what in the external environment is really affecting your business at the moment. And so if you've not gone through that exercise, it's a powerful exercise, because things that you may not think of individually, your team members will, because everybody comes from a different perspective, and some of those nuggets and ideas then start to frame then what some of the solutions can be. So for you to really take time to look at the external reality of what's impacting your business. And then subsequently, now we're going to the 4 E's. That is now the internal view. And so what we're going to ask you to do is to take the external perspective first, and then of the external perspective, we want you to just asterisk and highlight the top 4 or 5 things on that document that are having the greatest impact on your business. And then set that side by side with then your internal analysis. And so the internal analysis starts with trends and issues. You know, what are we seeing as the trends and issues inside our business? You know, we may see, you know, lots of hyperactivity amongst our team. We may see the ones that are telecommuting are disengaging. We may see, you know, lots of different trends and issues that are going on, and how can we capture those, big picture. And then as we get into, you know, the internal assessment, the vision, strategy, and goals. So right now, what are the short-term goals and priorities that we have? So, you know, do we have those in place? Have we articulated those? So like, one of the things we know is if we articulate very clearly no more than 3 kind of goals and ways to get into action, we know that that has a compelling influence. And so another thing psychologically that we know that our team needs at this time is they need clear expectations, clear priorities, and clear accountability. So let me repeat that. They need clear expectations, clear priorities from us as leaders, and that's when I say goals, I really mean goals and priorities in the short term, and they need clear accountability. And so In addition to when we interact with them, the emotional trust, compassion, stability, and hope is kind of how we come across to them. The clear expectations, priorities, and very specifically accountabilities are how we lead them so that they feel stability from us as a leader. And so part of that is really thinking about that with all of this in context, okay? And so we have to take stock of our essential projects. Are there key projects in the company right now we should put on hold? Do we divert all of our energy to the things that are most important for the business to survive and then thrive? And so are there things we have our people focused on right now that we can just delay and put on hold? That's a vital question for us as leaders to answer. Are we also looking at emerging customer data consistently to see, are there any emerging trends? Is there anything to be hopeful and optimistic about? And are there trends that we don't want to see? And are we in touch with our customers about those? And how are we taking in the consistent, changes that we're seeing with emerging data? And what does that mean to us in the short term? And what is that going to mean to us in the longer term? And then estimating impact and risk. So given all of this, given what our short-term goals are, given where we have our team focused, are we, suspending, changing projects? What do we see in emerging customer data? What then are the impacts and risks to the business in the short term? And what are those in the longer term? So you can see the value of taking your team through this acknowledging reality and assessing impact process, because what it does is it gets everybody active on that rational part of our brain, because the worst thing we can do in this time is to be immobilized and not take the calculated risks and the action in our business that we need to be taking to make sure that not only do we survive, but we actually can thrive coming out of this. And so a number of things that you can do as a business to ensure that that happens. And so I want to encourage you. Some of you have probably done a good amount of this assessment in your head, but I'm just giving you some really practical methodology to do this individually and especially collectively. Maybe with your leadership team, maybe with team members, depending on what your role is. But what we want then is we want to get to this last component, which is creating vision options. And what I would say to you is you might change that vernacular depending on where you are and who your team is. Sometimes it's creating new priorities, creating alternatives. And what we want to do is we don't want any of these to be set in stone. We just want you to get the group, yourself and your team, really active in, so if this is our current reality and we've marked on the 4 E's as well as the 4 S's, an asterisk, what are the most compelling of those that we need to address? How do we gravitate that to some alternatives that will help us to address that quickly in the business? We always encourage you to start with the things that are around addressing those that are impacting the customer, is high priority, those that are in fact impacting your cash flow, and those that are impacting your productivity. So as we think about, those 3, we think about, what are the ones that are impacting your business most. And so homework for you in, the time we have is really to think about, how do I do this effective analysis to get to those alternatives? You may need to do this multiple times. So this may be, you may need to get to alternatives for your sales force. You may need to sit down with your finance group and accounting and get to alternatives with them about cost savings. You may need to get to some alternatives with your executive team about how you support your key stakeholders, some of your key customers at this time. You know, you may need to get to some alternatives as it relates to the productivity of your team and stepping up in some areas. And then, you know, those of you that are addressing changes in your workforce may be really helpful for you to look at multiple alternatives around how to keep as many of your sales force busy and as many of your team busy on whatever basis you can once you explore what some of these opportunities are. And so I have been talking for a while. I'm going to ask Carol if this has generated any thoughts for you as well, and then we'll go to the question and answer. So Carol?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of interesting as we think about it. I can't help but listen with the Goering Center ear as our own business as we're working through this. And as we first started on our journey, we had a retreat for our organization, got our senior lead team together for a full day webinar, which video for a full day is both challenging and a great opportunity, and done well. Still turned out to be a level 10 meeting at a level 10, which was pretty awesome. We certainly dealt with some of the current realities, and then we talked about what are the great things that are going to come out of this. How are we going to come out better, just like you talked about on the chart. And we selected a 120-day window and said, what if our business disruption goes for this period of time? So what are the things we need to do that are going to be different? And I will tell you, one of the best things that we came out with is this very webinar and this topic, and working with Diane and her team and coming out with these vision options that say, you know, our mission still is about nurture and educate our family and private businesses, shifting that vision a little bit of how we do that. The what is clear. And creating a different how has been the opportunity for us. And so this is going to change how we think about communicating. We've talked about online learning as a key initiative and a key part of our longer term vision. This just helped us have a little bit more of a burning platform to do it. So, you know, out of challenge comes great opportunity sometimes. And while our vision hasn't changed dramatically, the way we get there might.
Yeah, and Carol, I really appreciate you mentioning, you know, that in these times, you know, we experience the worst with the fears and some of that, but we also see the best in people. And just on the news last evening was a story of a doctor serving patients in coronavirus. She was speeding on her way home. State trooper stopped her, and instead of giving her a ticket, he gave her his 5 face masks that were precious to him in his own health, because she was in the front lines and exposed to so much more disease than he was. And you just go, oh my gosh, we've got the opportunity to really see the very best in each other in these times. And so we want you to be optimistic and to do what you can to reach out to the community that supports your business and the people that you support. Because sometimes it's the offer of help and the offer that people take us up on that creates opportunity as well. And so we do want to encourage you with that optimism, and to know that, you know, we will remember the extraordinary things that people did during this time as well. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to questions, and would like Travis to see just kind of what questions we're getting in the chat box. What are some things that, you know, we have stimulated? What questions do our leaders have?
Well, if everyone can hear me, we did have a question about how do we handle performance coaching in this environment when we know folks are having trouble adjusting to new work reality, but they are really underperforming. How do we balance compassion with results?
Yeah, and I think part of that is, you know, if we're using that trust, compassion, stability, hope model, it's really socializing that with an individual, you know, because the reality is, I know, Travis, you're an individual. You work on our team, and he has 3 young boys at home, and he is their teacher right now. And, you know, while there's online school, you know, everybody has a different situation they're focusing on at home. And so, we have to account for that. But having short-term clear expectations, priorities, and accountability is the answer. And so socializing with an individual, what do you think is realistic by Friday? Are these expectations something that you feel like you can do? And how can I help you to prioritize what you've got going on so that you can be accountable for these things by the time that we are agreeing to? And let's monitor that, see how you do, and see if we need to adjust. And so it's that idea that we don't back off, but we just really socialize together the reality of what this person is going through. I just know that I've got a 19-year-old that's home from Ohio State, and it's so easy for me compared to others that have school-age kids that, we just recognize that that's a 20-plus hour week job just to get their assignments done. And so, everybody has an unusual amount on their plate right now, and we still need to make progress as a business for those of us that have remote workforce right now. Yeah.
And I would add one thing to that too, and I think it's that, again, we talk about bringing our humanness to the equation. Sometimes just simply listening is what people need right now, because as you've mentioned, the idea of fear, the stress, the pressure people are going through, I think that just lending a soft ear, understanding what the hurdles are, what's in somebody's way. We're working through some technology challenges, even new laptops for some folks and things like that. But until we understand what the issues are, it's hard to address. And it may take a little bit longer right now to be able to give that space and time for people to get to the real issue that's at the heart.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, Carol, it's really important to listen, especially to fear, and to name it, and then to ask, what are ways that you help yourself to rationalize your way away from this fear? Because I think that, there's that opportunity as we coach each of our people to really listen and reflect back on kind of some of the fearful things that they say, and to say, how are you managing that? What do you do to help yourself be more optimistic? And so that idea that we're not discounting at all, that all of it is very real, but we're also helping them with some proactive strategies to self-manage, to really engage their rational brain. Because I think sometimes, the team even can get into just speaking about the fear and how difficult and how hard it is. And, and we as leaders absolutely want to listen, but we also want to get them to that productive, rational, kind of objective, optimistic place, hopefully by the end of our conversation. So it's that managing it together. Yeah. So Travis,
Diane, to that end, what you were just referencing there, I thought Jason in our chat box had a great comment related to that. So just, what do we need to do in the morning to stay positive and motivated? And he just shares that he's watched how he views and frames the events of each day. He says when he starts to feel burdened, he questions whether those are actual burdens or are they responsibilities that come with blessings on the other side. So he finds that attitude and impact are much different when he acts from a premise of considering those responsibilities that come from blessings as opposed to looking at them as burdens. So I really thought that was relevant to the point you were just making. And just to follow up on that, kind of shifting gears to maybe a little more pragmatic question, I was wondering if you and Carol could maybe share a little bit more about the importance of scanning that external environment. I know you covered quite a bit of ground with that, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to make any more points about that if you had any.
Okay, so let me speak to the first part of your conversation first, Travis, and then we'll get to the external part. One of the things that is important, we know in all of our work on positive psychology, that, you know, our team will be much more positive if we start each conversation with a positive and we end with a positive. There's a psychology around that that really helps our team. So whatever is authentic to you as a leader, you can talk with your team about what are we grateful for, what are our blessings, what do we have to be optimistic about today. So whatever language suits you, there's a lot of ways to really come to your team on a daily basis, already seeking the positive and with a grateful heart. And especially, there are so many amazing human interest stories right now. Feel free to take those and share those. You know, just instead of highlighting, oh my gosh, you know, we have a person we're losing every 10 minutes, which is the reality in New York. What are the great things that we're seeing that are superhuman that people are doing? And, you know, and how do we start and end with that positive psychology around gratefulness, blessings, optimism, you know, whatever is authentic to you would be great. And so then gravitating on to your question then, Travis, about, you know, assessing external reality. One of the things that's a really great thing to do is picking up the phone and hot wiring a connection to your customers around what they're seeing is the external reality, because, you know, likely they're facing very similar things. And part of your external reality check can really be asking a few of these questions of your customers, you know, asking a few of these questions of, you know, if you're a business that has multiple sites, you know, who are those key stakeholders, partners in your business that you can actually have a conversation with to then add more depth to what you know about that external analysis. And so it's such an important time to connect. You know, in our world, I reach out to our key customers once a week and just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Here's a quote I saw. Here's an article I thought would be helpful to you. You know, if there's not something pragmatically we can do for them at the moment, we serve a lot of K-12 schools, and superintendents and their teams in the last 3 to 4 weeks have been absolutely underwater. So I wouldn't dare say, hey, meet with me at the moment, but I would certainly say, you know, here's what I see that might be a helpful resource to you. You know, here are things that that may be helpful to you. So those ideas, Travis, around confirming our external analysis and using that as a purposeful way to connect with our key partners, clients, customers, and stakeholders.
Carol, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would echo all that and apologize. I understand there was an echo in my microphone, so I put my headset on. Hopefully that will help a little bit. I heard of a school, private school here in town, who the teachers made a video for all the students to help them stay the course and like, you got this through this time. And the students then also did a video for the teachers to encourage them to weather the storm. We're reaching out to our member base, like Diane talked about with the customer base as well, and learning, you know, maybe it's just a few questions, maybe it's just a voicemail, maybe it's just that virtual touch. But finding that sense of connection in our community has really been helpful. We had a case where one of our logistics company members was overwhelmed. I mean, they're just having tremendous business because they're in the distribution channel for things like groceries. We have another member whose business was off because their logistics model focused on a different part of the market segment. Whether anything good came out of it or not, we've connected the two to see what's possible, and maybe one company can help the others and do better deliveries and keep more people employed. So we have a wonderful opportunity just by reaching out to people and learning what their pain points are. And maybe all they need is just to be heard, but maybe there's something we can do beyond that. I had the experience of a former client from a different part of my life going through his, seemed like he was going through his address book. He's quarantined in New York City. And I was, you know, my last name's B, so he'd gotten to the B's, but calling everybody and just kind of checking in. And I think it was good for him, and it was really good for the people he reached out to as well. So this is a wonderful time to build community. And I do think that there are going to be some opportunities we can't even begin to imagine that will come out of that.
That's for certain.
Completely agree.
Yes, and I think, for example, in healthcare, I think, telemedicine has really grabbed hold, and I think that there'll be a percent of business that continues in that vein. I think there are lots of telecommuters, people that are working from home that will have much more freedom to continue to do that once they demonstrate that they're really capable of being self-directed and more autonomous. So I think there are a number of trends that this is going to stimulate, which are great trends. And so we'll certainly see more of that. Travis, did you have another question for us?
I did, and we have about 4 to 5 minutes left here, Diane, so I want to try to squeeze in as many as I can. So I'll just two-part this next session here. Jackie, our friend from south of the Ohio River, she wants to know, are there any, as she says, watch outs as we move through this exercise? I'm thinking what she means there, what pitfalls do we need to avoid? So let's answer that one. And then Jason Todd asked a question that I thought was really good. And he wants to know, are there any practical tips on encouraging our sales and business development folks when they are unable to do, what they do best, which is meet face-to-face, develop those deep relationships, and build trust. So field those however you want and whatever you want. And Carol, feel free to chime in there.
Okay. So I'll start with, are there any watch-outs? Let's start with that one. The most significant 2 watch-outs are, this is a time for most people when they're feeling fearful that they tend to isolate themselves. So we need to really work counter to our intuition. And so when we say reach out, connect with people, it's for your own health and well-being as much as it is for your customers, stakeholders, team. So we want to encourage that, on a daily basis, connecting with team members, making sure that, we're resisting that urge to really isolate ourselves because of our fear. The second one is around acting decisively. And so when we're back on the 22nd, we're going to go deep on acting decisively and aligning the team to whatever those new priorities, goals, alternatives, however we're going to describe those are. But we want to resist the temptation right now of having all the information. A decision that gets us 75% in the direction that we want to go is a really good decision to make right now. And so we're in, these turbulent times where we're not going to have all the information. We don't even know the impact of everybody going back to work, and so there are some things that we want to encourage is to take decisive action, get a confirm, from your team that they're the right actions to take with what we know now, and trust yourself to keep modifying it over time to make that 75%, 90%, and then 100% the direction we want to go. But we want to resist needing to have answers before we act, because right now we're in that time where we're not going to have all the answers, but we must act to survive and thrive. So anything else, Carol, there?
Yeah, I think in the pitfalls, one of the things we're watching are the introverts and the extroverts and how they're responding to all this. One of our guys sent out the introverts unite separately in your own home. And so for some, recognizing that introverts may be having an easier time in this adjustment and that our extroverts are kind of bouncing off the walls, kind of counterintuitive to the way we usually work in our business world. And so I think for the sales and business development people, being aware that we need to engage our extroverts and find ways that they can stay connected. And, again, thank goodness for all the different forms of technology that we have where we can do that. And I think this is a wonderful time on the relationship building side to find unique opportunities to listen to what the real issues of our potential clients and our existing clients are. New business opportunities will certainly emerge through this time period because things we couldn't have imagined will be surfacing as people adjust to this new reality. And if we have that optimism, as Diane talked about it earlier in the call, what's possible from here?
Mm-hmm. And so the last comment I wanted to speak to along those lines, Travis, is around the sales and business development personnel. One of the things that is vitally important is to recognize that most of those people are extroverts, right? Often they really love the connection with other human beings. So encouraging them to maintain high connection with your customers in an add value way, and then to brainstorm as a team, what are those things? So you might have a collection of articles you develop as a team. You might have news stories. You might have specific things that, you know, are helpful to your customer base that you have them doing. It's a great time for education, training, book reading, you know, things that really help them to skill up and to assess what are the different skills that are going to be needed when our business comes back online, and how prepared are we? Because, you know, they may need to get really comfortable doing sales presentations for a while via Zoom or Skype. And, you know, can they be practicing that with each other? You know, how can we use this as an opportunity to keep them busy and productive and to sharpen you know, their skills while, you know, they're in preparation, and then to really have them help analyze what is going to be different and how do we need to position ourselves differently with maybe new skill sets and mindsets when, you know, we do turn that faucet back on. Is that making sense? Yeah.
Yes, it is. And Carol, did you want to just quickly add something there, as we have about 1 minute left?
Yeah, I think it's interesting as for the sales and business development people. And then what we found, we think at some point we're going to kind of catch up with the way the world's going to be for, let's just say, the next 4 weeks. You know, we're going to continue to do webinars. We're going to continue to create new programming and do those things. But some of our normal activities aren't going to happen in the way they typically would. And so we've challenged each one of our team members, as Diane was pointing out, to do some personal development. You know, what's the article you hadn't read because you just didn't have time? What are the podcasts or the other webinars, or even, you know, just staying connected and what's happening in the family and private business world? We're going to hold each other accountable to that and talk about that on a weekly basis, because I think it's a wonderful chance to take a breath, look at the world a little bit differently, take a step up, and think about how would I like to be in our new reality? Not the new normal, because I don't think it is going to be that, but how are we going to be in our new reality? And I think that phrase, we got this, we do, and we will.
Yeah, and that new reality there, I thought, go ahead, Diane, did you have one more thing?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, somebody actually threw out the idea of our extroverts actually having a Friday happy hour with beverages and personal conversations. So the virtual happy hours there, at least for now, could become a thing, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge you, Carol, and the team at the Goering Center for your leadership. You know, reaching out to your members when they need it most is what you're great at. And so we just really appreciate your leadership and the leadership of the team at the Goering Center.
Well, and we appreciate your partnership. We can't do it without our wonderful partners out there. And this has been a phenomenal webcast. I think we've all learned a lot, and this is just the beginning of step one. So much to be gained between now and the next session.
Yeah.
A little bit of homework to do in case you have that, you're looking for that what to work on. And we'll be reconvening. I know Travis is going to wrap us up here and on April 22nd. So you want to take it from there?
I sure will, and we'll get everybody out of here. Thank you, Carol, again. We really just appreciate it. And again, thank you to Diane Egbers as well, for both of you for sharing your expertise and experience. It's such a critical time. I guess for some next steps for everyone, you will be receiving an email with resources and a link to the recording for this webinar. You'll want to be sure to find the link in that email to register for the part 2 of the webinar series. And again, that's coming up on April 22nd. Now, if you want to connect with us for further questions, you can engage with both Goering Center and Leadership Acceleration on all the social media platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. And be sure to subscribe to the Leading Edge podcast. We'll have some content that goes right along with this. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or you can actually search the Leading Edge podcast with Travis Nipper on Google to find the podcast there. We were happy to welcome so many people from both Cincinnati and outside of Cincinnati virtually this morning. And then again, on behalf of our producer, Lisa Jonas, there in the studio, Carol Butler and Diane Egbers, this is Travis Nipper, and we thank you again for joining us. Have a happy and healthy Wednesday.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.